Today I'm joined by Dr Ginni Mansberg, a GP, media personality, author and co-founder of Evidence-Based Skincare, ESK, a science-based skincare line designed to address aging skin concerns. Ginni has dedicated her work to empowering women with practical, evidence-based health advice, appearing on shows like Sunrise and Today Extra. Her book, The M Word, How to Thrive in Menopause, is a comprehensive guide to help women navigate the challenges of menopause with confidence and ease. In this conversation, we unpack the skin and facial changes that occur during the perimenopause. What structural changes happen to your face during midlife? What is happening to your skin elasticity? And how can you keep your skin as healthy and glowing as possible? If you're struggling with symptoms of the perimenopause, including rosacea, dryness, and thinner skin, this episode is for you. Let's get into it.
I feel like this is just the culmination of the Periposse coming together after so long. I'm so excited about this.
Awesome. Okay, well, I would love you to tell our listeners and our viewers who you are and why you have such an interest in this space that we really share such a passion in.
Yeah, so I'm Ginni Mansberg. I'm a GP in Sydney, and I really don't do much primary care anymore. I would consider myself like a midlife women's go-to sort of doctor. So I do a lot of menopause, but because there's just so much else that happens in midlife. They get diagnosed with blood pressure for the first time. They might get diabetes for the first time. We all know after the Swan study that they put on a lot of weight. I like to be there for women at every point in their life, particularly when they hit midlife. But I am a bit of a slashy, like aren't we all these days? So I have a number of other roles. I do a lot of podcasting myself. I do television, so breakfast television here in Australia. I've done a few other shows and a bit of an entrepreneur. I've got two companies. So one, I do workplace education and workplace kind of menopause policy advice, so around menopause. And then I have a cosmeceutical skincare company. So that's super exciting.
So what I really wanted for us to drill down today is some of those physical changes in terms of skin and facial changes, maybe even a little bit about the body changes that we see. Because what I would say is that women who come to see me at my clinic, yes, they'll be complaining of, not sleeping and the low mood and the aches and pains and the vaginal symptoms, but they're also complaining of a complete loss of confidence. They don't have confidence in their brain anymore to remember words. They don't have confidence in their urinary system to let them wait till they find the next toilet. They don't have confidence in their body to comfortably have sex. But they don't have confidence in how they look. Their skin is maybe really irritated. They might have been someone who could walk into a department store and have a squirt of anything and pop it on their face. Not anymore. They're super sensitive, or they might have been someone who could just go in and pop into any local salon and have a treatment, but now they're really fearful. And they often look in the mirror and don't really recognize the person looking back at them. And I think there is this sort of shame around that. I think the Barbie movie captured it really pretty well. You're meant to be really beautiful, but you're not meant to want to be beautiful and all the things. And I'd love you to explain to the audience what is actually going on and why are we feeling all these changes even in how we look.
So listeners to this podcast now understand very well that there are receptors for the hormone estrogen in particular on literally almost every cell in the body. And it's not just an ovarian hormone. It is in your gums, it's on your hair follicles, it's in your heart, it's in your bone cells, your muscle cells, and very many of the different cells that comprise the skin. And so if it's okay, can we look at what estrogen does inside the skin and then what happens as your estrogen levels start to decline as you head into menopause in those late stages of perimenopause and then as you go into postmenopause. So I actually love estrogen. I want to marry it. I think it's like the most amazing hormone. So some of the things that it does in the skin is it helps with the skin barrier. So your skin has this absolute fence on the outside of it. And you can think of it as a brick and mortar structure where the bricks are dead skin cells that have been shed to the top, and they're held in place by a mortar of combination of fats and proteins. And a lot of those fats and proteins are made under the influence of estrogen. So when you lose your estrogen, you do start to lose your skin barrier. And that's important because the skin barrier keeps bad stuff out. So we're talking about environmental toxins, bugs, bacteria, viruses, and it keeps your good stuff in, and that's mainly your hydration. Park that. As we now know from multiple of these podcasts, estrogen is a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. And so not only does it keep some of the inflammatory sort of compounds that the immune system would be normally generating on a leash and stopping them from going rogue in the skin, but it actually is responsible for generating some of the specifically anti-inflammatory agents within every body system, but including the skin. So as the estrogen declines, you're going to see more inflammation. So if you're somebody who once upon a time had dermatitis, maybe even as a child, if you have psoriasis or you have rosacea, some of these things can come back with a vengeance as you lose the anti-inflammatory protection of estrogen, and make that even more if you are the sort of person who has high levels of androgens or male hormones that are made both from your ovaries but also from the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. We know that androgens in women are pro-inflammatory. They are pro-oxidative as opposed to antioxidant, which is what estrogen is. And when you get those two combined, because your androgens stay relatively stable for much longer than your estrogens, which just fall off a cliff towards the end of perimenopause. What you'll often see is acne. So 1 in 4 women will get an acne breakout. And very, very importantly, estrogen stimulates your fibroblasts. Now, they are cells that sit inside your skin and make collagen. Now, we love collagen.
We do.
We love it. We don't just love it in the skin. It's the most easy to spot place where you see collagen, but it's in your vagina, it's in your pelvic floor muscles, it's in your bones. So we love collagen as a very, very important ingredient. Fibroblasts that make collagen have estrogen receptors on them that turbocharge them. And also estrogen keeps on a noose this particular protein called metalloproteinase 1. Now, that's an enzyme that breaks down collagen. So you get two things happening. You're not making as much and you're breaking it down at a rate of knots. So now what we see from studies is that in the first 5 years after menopause, women will typically lose about 30% of the collagen in their skin and then continue to lose another 2.1% per year after that. And what you're going to see within a couple of years of a woman going through menopause who doesn't go on hormone therapy, you're going to see fine lines and wrinkles and even big pores, because the collagen helps kind of make sure that that pilosebaceous unit is minimized. That's the unit where hair and sweat comes out and oil and sebum, things like that, that the skin around that is nice and tight. Lose your collagen, that all goes floppy and your pores look really big. So if you put all of that together, what do we see? So we're seeing the changes of aging. They are made worse by the fact that her skin is drying out as well because of that impaired skin barrier. The skin dryness can keep women up at night. It can actually, they itch and scratch on their legs and all over their bodies. It's really debilitating. And the other thing is that 70% of women will report skin sensitivity. Now, that is a very large number of women who, exactly as you said, they could use anything. They could go to Aldi and buy whatever was on the shelves, for their skin and not react to anything. And all of a sudden, they're the princess and the pea. Literally everything is irritating their skin. One more thing to say is that the estrogen, for some reason, and we haven't quite worked out the mechanism, keeps the pH of the skin reasonably low. And there was some really nice work by a scientist called Jiang, who's amazing, from Michigan. And what she showed was that the pH of a premenopausal woman kind of sits roughly between about 4.5 and 5.3, which is quite a big range. Now, I don't want to traumatize anybody with Year 9 science, but do you remember that the pH scale takes you from 0, carboxylic acid would burn your face off, 14 is like bleach, 7 is neutral, 7.4 is your blood. So a lot of people think they need to be alkaline, but your skin is actually quite acid. And we call it the protective acid mantle. It helps ensure the integrity of your skin barrier. Well, Jiang's work showed that as you go through menopause, it's not an age-related thing, it is actually a hormonal-related thing. Your pH will lift to 6, and that becoming slightly more alkaline will also further contribute to itchiness, to dryness, and to an impaired skin barrier. So chuck all that together is just not good.
I have to say, in the last few weeks, a number of women coming in with horrendously itchy necks, to the point where their husbands are getting up and getting cold face washers and putting them in the fridge and freezer. Like, it really is, people go, just a bit of dry skin, but this is like really impacting people. They can't sleep because they're so itchy and burny, actually.
Yeah, and I think often women are embarrassed to tell anybody that they get Botox. They're embarrassed to say what they spend on their skin. It's seen as a vanity thing that's very Hollywood. You might as well just go fill your face up with ridiculous amounts of filler. It's just, not valid. But medically, it is really valid. It can be really quite distressing. And, you get a rosacea flare. That's very, very distressing. So I think we need to validate women where they're at and what is important to them, and take that seriously, and just make sure that she's honoured for what is really important to her.
Are you struggling to navigate the perimenopause, or curious to learn more about the menopause from some of the top experts in this space? I am so excited to tell you about an upcoming event, She Thrives, an evening in conversation with myself, Dr. Kelly Casperson, who joined me in episode 89 for a brilliant chat about sex during midlife, and Dr. Vonda Wright, who was on episode 54, who shared how to conquer midlife and beyond with strength training and nutrition. Join us on Monday the 3rd of March at Newcastle City Hall from 7 p.m. A percentage of every ticket purchased will also be donated to the Debbie Gaunt Foundation, which supports women's mental health during these transitional years. To book your spot, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to see you there. This is one you're not going to want to miss. And the other thing that goes on for a lot of women, which they're surprised about, is that there's actually structural changes within the face. We're changing bone structure. We're losing bone from the cheek, the temple, around the eye, the orbit's getting bigger. We're losing, the angle of the jaw, the muscles are changing shape, the fat pads are shrinking and slipping. So there is a lot going on in the face, and that's why you don't look like you did when you were 20. It's not just about wrinkly skin.
Absolutely. But I do think that when the quality of the skin is good, you just look a lot better. Even if you have a few wrinkles, even if you've got a few pigmentation spots, if your skin looks beautiful and smooth and the texture is good, you just do look younger. It just looks better.
I agree 100%. I have to say, if someone has to pick with their budget, I will say 100 times spend your money on decent skincare that is being worked out to be the correct thing for you 100 times more than do anything else. Because actually glowing and healthy skin and what you do at home every day is, it's lovely to come into a clinic and have treatments and all the things. But actually, if you don't have great skin, the result's going to be, to be honest, not as good as it could have been. But also, I think, why would you want to have kind of plump lips or bigger cheeks and then not have great skin? It just doesn't look good.
I agree. I mean, I think you sometimes need to kiss a few frogs to find your handsome prince, and then you finally go, I like that. Because, I've been really fascinated by all of the new things that we're being, invaded by, particularly in the UK where you were originally from. But, there's a lot of these exosomes now that are coming in and polynucleotides. And I think a lot of women are really interested in exploring that. And some women go, it's the game changer. It does everything for me. And there are other women who go, don't really know that it's really done that much. And I've now just dropped $2,000 on a couple of sessions with an injector. But I think you do you, whatever works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that is a real challenge for anyone listening in Australia is that, certainly doctors in this space, we're quite limited about the things that we're allowed to talk about. And so more and more people are actually getting their information from overseas sources or sort of non-medical sources. And I have to say that's quite frustrating for most of us, because we're kind of like, we'd like to voice an opinion, but we're restricted around advertising and can't comment on a lot of things, which is definitely a bit of a challenge. Ginny, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what impact hormone replacement therapy has on skin and how quickly people might notice a difference, or is it something that they will be able to visually see, or is it something that just is under the surface seen by a microscope?
Both. So we have reasonably good trial data now that taking what we would call systemic hormone therapy, so taking it whether you decide to do a patch or a gel or whether you decide to take a tablet, something that's going to go into your entire body, it'll hit the skin. You can't spot choose where it goes. It'll hit your guts, it'll hit your bones, it'll hit your brain. And with all of that, if you feel better, you are sleeping better, you're making better food choices, you're able to actually get out and exercise and look for yourself, that will show up in your soul, like in your aura. Like people will be able to spot you and go, wow, you look amazing, and you maybe not be able to pick it. But studies have actually shown that taking systemic hormone therapy does indeed boost skin texture and measures of collagen in the skin. What we have less studied is the skin barrier function, although it stands to reason, and anecdotally what we hear is that people's itchy skin does go away, but it hasn't been particularly well studied.
And in terms of, I have heard patients tell me that they are popping their gel on their face, their systemic HRT, or they've read online about doing this. I'd love to know I know it's a little controversial, but what are your thoughts on people using their hormone therapy like that?
I'm going to explain why I don't recommend it. But first of all, if you think that your primary objective in using hormone therapy is to make your face look younger, I think we need to have a talk about why you're using it. But at the same time, will it work? Yes. And we have lots of studies that show that topically applying estrogen to the skin, it is absorbed. It's designed to be absorbed through the skin, and it is effective, highly effective at helping reverse all of those estrogen loss effects in the skin. So that's the first thing to say. Is it going to work? Oh, yes, it's definitely going to work. And here's why I wouldn't recommend it. First and foremost, the skin on your face tends to be a little sun damaged. And as a result of that sun damage, the absorption is not as good for the reason you were put on the HRT in the first place. And we have got studies that show that the buttocks and the thighs is the best place to put it because the skin tends to be thinner, less sun damaged, and your absorption, your ability to attain the levels of estrogen in your bloodstream that we want you to have to combat your symptoms and your bone loss, that sort of thing, is better if we put it in the least sun damaged skin possible. The second thing is that if you put it on, you can't have used a moisturizer for the hour beforehand, and you can't use any other skin treatment or any other moisturizer on top of your skin for the next hour afterwards so that it doesn't compete with the estrogen that you have. Okay, that's a problem because these things, if you put it on a gel form, that's quite drying. Yes, there are little moisturizers in it, but it's not going to be enough for you, and I want you on sunscreen. Like, I definitely do not want you leaving the house. And if you are sitting near a window, the sun's UVA for aging rays that are there from sun up to sundown, 365 days a year that pass through clouds, they also pass through a window. We cannot have you leaving the house without a sunscreen on. And what are you going to do? Wake up at 4 a.m. and put your estrogen on and then not have a shower? It's problematic. So some people just go, well, I'll put it on in addition. So I'll have my estrogen on my thighs and my buttocks, and they'll put a little bit of extra on my face. At that point, we don't know what dose you're on, and we could potentially need to adjust the progesterone that you have because of if you have a uterus and we give you an excess amount of estrogen and we don't compensate for that with enough progesterone, we can get an overgrowth of the lining of the uterus. You have heard this on this podcast 100 times, and that can cause abnormal bleeding, and potentially that could be cancerous for your uterus. So there are a number of reasons why I don't think it is the best place to put it on in general. Having said all of which, if what you really want to do is you've rubbed it everywhere and there's a little bit between your fingers and you're thinking, where will I put this? I'm happy for you to rub that on your face or your neck if that's what you want to do. Just know that if you're going to put a moisturizer on top of it, it's going to be way less effective.
And what about in some of the overseas countries where they're starting to use like estriol, a week estrogen in face creams and things like that? Do you have any thoughts on that, Ginni?
So estriol is the form of estrogen that's actually interestingly made in a placenta of pregnant women. So it's a really interesting form of estrogen to put on a postmenopausal or a perimenopausal woman, having said of which the evidence for it being absorbed vaginally is really good, and we do have some studies of it being applied to the skin and being very, very, very effective. Our problem is that we don't know what blood levels we're getting. So if you do that in addition to the levels that you're putting on just generally, we don't know, again, whether we're going to overdose you in estrogen and whether we have sufficient progesterone. And again, it's one thing to put it in the vagina. It doesn't really compete with anything. By the way, I'm sure everybody who listens to this podcast knows that if you use vaginal estrogen, we don't have sex. And that's not about protecting your husband or protecting your partner. It's because semen is going to dilute the estrogen in there. That's a wasted dose. We don't use it and then have sex. Similarly, if we put the estrogen on your face, you're not meant to use anything else for quite a while. I don't know how practical that is for women. So if you want to give it a shot, the 0.5 ml that we normally apply to a woman's vagina that is perfectly fine and doesn't cause any issues, I think as long as you're sticking to 0.5 ml and you want to do a couple of areas in your face, I don't have a problem with that. But I think you've just got to be careful if you think that that's the only thing you're going to use for your face, or if you're going to use a whole lot. If you think that you're going to put 2-3 mils on, game's over. I don't know what that means in terms of how much progesterone you need.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'd love to talk to you now a little bit about skin ingredients. I think, in the last sort of 10 years, knowledge has increased dramatically. Patients will often speak to ingredients. I think back to 20 years ago where people talked about cleanse, tone and moisturize. Now people know about vitamin C and niacinamide and peptides, as you say. People are definitely more educated to an extent. But the reality is, I think that there is analysis paralysis. There's so many products, there's so many ingredients. People seem to be so confused. So I'd like to start with a really simple question. Why can we not just take a vitamin C tablet or a vitamin B multivitamin and not bother with putting things on our face?
Yes, such a good question. And a lot of people say, it's all about beauty from the inside. And we do have quite a few studies that have shown that a really horrible diet with ultra-processed food does seem to correlate with more acne. We have other studies that show that it doesn't. And the studies of even diet for influencing your skin and even like hydration, it kind of logically makes sense, but we don't actually have the studies to validate that. And I think that's because you can't spot put it where you want it. Whereas the studies for applying things topical are unequivocal. Like we know that if you apply a vitamin C, as long as it's in the right biochemical form and in the right concentration, the pH of the product's correct, that it will actually do amazing things. And we have multiple peer-reviewed trials that have actually shown that. So for me, when I look at a trial, because I think that everybody says, there was a trial, it was, proven. There are different levels of proof when a scientist or a doctor looks at a trial than maybe a commercial entity. So the first thing that I do when I have a look at a trial is I scroll right down to the bottom to the section that says conflict of interest. And down there, if a trial is sponsored, so let's say you have the Lemonade Institute doing a study of lemonade, we know from studies that is going to be a very positive study. And the reason is because it's a bit of a pay for results kind of situation. People who run clinical trial companies are funded by people who want positive results. And so we know that about 85% of trials that are sponsored are positive, and not only that, but the ones that are negative will never see the light of day and be published, so they tend to get squashed. The second thing that I'll do is I'll scroll right up to the top and say, okay, how many people did we have in this trial? So if we had 20 women, 10 of whom were given this new U-Butte lemonade and 10 of whom were given a cup of tea, and we looked at them for a week and asked them how they felt, the science of that is quite poor, because the chances are that the people who took lemonade also ate broccoli, or also had a really good night's sleep, or also went for a run, or also were aged 26, while the ones who had, a cup of tea were aged 76. So scientists look at all the things that could also be impacting that outcome. And in order to have ruled all those other things out, you need big numbers to achieve what we call statistical significance. And then you need to follow these people up long enough to actually have some objective measurement of whether this thing was actually effective. So for me, when I look at a trial, I don't want to have a look at the company's website where they tell you about a trial, but they've never published it in a journal. I want to know if there's a conflict of interest. Have they sponsored the trial? How big are the numbers? How long was the follow-up? How, if somebody says, I've got lemonade for your hydration, or I'm going to give you no fluid. Okay, is lemonade good at hydrating you? From the Lemonade Institute, I'm going to say that it's a lot better than not drinking at all. But does that make it a really good drink of choice for absolutely everybody? I'd put it to you that even if the Lemonade Institute tells you that it's the best drink for hydration because they tried it against nothing, I would say that's a really interesting study that tells me nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if we can talk a little bit I suppose a little bit of my frustration is with the whole ingredient thing is that I often see patients coming in and they've read that vitamin C is really good or vitamin A is really good or whatever, but no one has actually sort of sat down and really looked at their skin. And so they might have rosacea and they come in and their face is roaring red because that vitamin C that they've happened to buy has absolutely flared everything up, and then they're absolutely beside themselves and self-conscious and feeling really worried about being on that meeting at work because everyone's going to be looking at their red cheeks, blah, blah, blah. And so what would your advice to people be around that?
So it can be really, really difficult, but exactly as you said, there are certain ingredients that are like a big red flag. So the reason why I think vitamin C is a big red flag for rosacea, and I would never put vitamin C on anybody's skin who has rosacea because it can often cause a flare. Even if it's only in 10 to 15% of people, that is enough to make me very, very wary. And the reason is because the only form of vitamin C with very good level evidence is L-ascorbic acid, the purest form of vitamin C, which is a very pernickety ingredient. It's hard to formulate with. It goes off very easily, particularly if you put it in a bottle with a dropper, that kind of thing. It goes off when exposed to oxygen. And it also must be formulated in a very low pH in an oil. So because of that, the very low pH, so we're talking about 3 or below, so very close to a lemon, that acidity will often flare up anybody with sensitive skin, and rosacea is one of the very many sensitive skin conditions. And the oil can also be occlusive. So for that reason, I would always exclude a vitamin C serum, because if you're going to use something that's not L-ascorbic acid, in which case you can use whatever pH you want, well, it doesn't have any evidence, so why would you bother anyway? I think maybe before you go and drop the grand national debt of a small country on your local skincare, maybe check in with a doctor that you trust, or a nurse practitioner or esthetician who really knows their stuff, understands the science, understands your skin, and can make recommendations for you. Because there's nothing worse than having wasted, it's not uncommon to waste $700 and realise that you've got nowhere. I also would look for skincare with a money-back guarantee. I know there are not a lot of them, but I think that if a skincare is worth its salt, they should be declaring the pH of their products, be really transparent with that, because particularly for menopausal skin, you don't want a particularly alkaline product that's going to even further disrupt your skin barrier. You want a money-back guarantee, and you want them to be really transparent with very high levels of customer service. So they'd be the things that I would look for. I would say that because we have all of those things at Evidence Skincare, but because I need to sleep at night and I can't just have somebody drop a whole lot of money, even if they had the best intentions, and buy all the wrong stuff and react. I feel like, no, we'll sort you out. I would never ask somebody to do that.
I agree. And at my clinic, we actually, on all the products, even though lots of the companies don't offer it, I offer that guarantee, because
That's
I
huge.
don't want people to be scared. And also, I also want them to know that, that moisturizer that might cost, $180 or whatever, that's a big concern for people. And especially if they've had their fingers burnt before. How many women have drawers full of products that they've bought in the supermarket, they've bought wherever, and then they realize, I don't even know when I'm meant to use this, or oh, I don't know, that's a bit tingly on my face. I'm not sure if that's right for me. And then all the guilt that people feel when every time they open that drawer and they see all those products. I don't want to add to that. So, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm very excited to share that Dr. Ginni has given us a special code for you to use on her skincare brand, ESK Evidence Skincare. If your skin is struggling with the symptoms of the perimenopause, or you just feel that it's not glowing and thriving how you want it to, every product is formulated with evidence-based ingredients proven to work, solving skin concerns like acne, aging, and pigmentation. Explore the range at eskcare.com, and for 10% off any purchase, use the code Dr. Shauna Watts at the checkout. Trust the evidence, see the results. Obviously, there is no Mrs. Average perimenopausal or menopausal patient, but what I'd love us to talk to now is what are the kind of minimum things that you think need to be in a routine? So, for example, I saw a patient, and I did talk about this earlier recently, who was a doctor actually, and she was still washing her face with soap. And she told me that at medical school, they were told that actually soap and water was fine on your skin, and we had a bit of a giggle about it. She did say, oh, it was Dove soap, and I was like, that's not making it any better for me. So what are the kind of minimum things generally that you would like to see someone maybe who's not done very much with the skin? Because I think there's definitely the skincare aficionados who absolutely are obsessed with skincare, but I actually think there's a silent majority of women who kind of don't even know where to begin. Maybe their mum was someone who was, not a big makeup person, or they didn't use a lot of skincare. They didn't grow up seeing someone doing this stuff, and they kind of feel like they missed out on the memo and they don't know where to start, and they're quite embarrassed. They're thinking, oh, I don't really know where to even begin. So what would you like to see them use?
So it's never too late to start to use a broad spectrum SPF product. And the reason is that the sun's UV rays are pro-inflammatory, pro-aging, pro-pigmentatory. Everything that you're probably trying to avoid is still going to continue to get worse, both short-term and long-term, by excessive exposure to the sun's UV rays. And in this country, we have quite a lot of obsession with the SPF factor. So the SPF is the multiple of time that you can spend in the sun when you're wearing this product versus going out in the sun without that product on before you burn. So, Shauna, you're from Northern Ireland. You have
the palest skin in the world.
You have a Fitzpatrick 5 skin, so Fitzpatrick's 2 skin, so you're quite fair. If you go out even at 10 in the morning, we could say that you would probably burn in 15 minutes. Even in Melbourne, even in Wisconsin, you could actually burn your skin. So we would say that if you're going to use an SPF 30, you could have 30 times 15 amount of time in the sun. So if your mass is as good as mine, we're now in the sun for 450 minutes, that's just quite a lot of time. It doesn't tell us anything about the sun's UVA for aging rays that are there from sun up to sundown, 365 days a year, and it doesn't tell us anything about the kind of ingredients we're using. So broadly, we speak about chemical or organic sunscreens or physical or inorganic sunscreens, and there are 2 physical or inorganic sunscreens, and they're titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. And zinc oxide is generally considered to be the safest, the least irritating. The thing about zinc oxide is it's often white and slimy, but I think recently there's been a rush to market of excellent, beautiful quality zinc oxide sunscreens that are even up to an SPF 50. I don't actually recommend anybody does go and sit in the sun for 3 or 4 hours. I think the guidelines are you retop that up every half an hour if you're going to sit in the sun. And quite honestly, I think there is no sunscreen that will protect you at that time of the day. Like, get into the shade, put a hat on, don't be out in the sun at that time. But if you really care about SPF, you can get an SPF 50 and you can actually stick that on your face. And I would say that a zinc sunscreen is probably a non-negotiable for everybody with potentially sensitive skin like perimenopausal women. I really couldn't agree with you enough about the soap. We do want to cleanse the skin. Ideally, there are some toxins from the environment, from pollution. There's sweat, and a lot of people are allergic to or are very sensitive to sweat. So if you have sensitive skin, we want to get that off your face, and let's face it, we all use makeup as well. If you have rosacea, the guidelines are that you use a creamy cleanser with a pH of ideally 5.5 or below, so we're not disrupting your skin barrier further, only once a day. Now, they're the guidelines for rosacea. We don't have the same guidelines for generally sensitive skin, but I think that if that is you, then in the morning, if you have a shower, just put some water on your face and you're very sensitive, and at night, do a proper cleanse. I'm not a big fan of the double, triple cleanse with the serious cleansers.
I 100% agree. My patients do an evening cleanse. We do a water splash in the morning because people feel like they want a bit of a freshen up.
Yes.
But that's all we do. I just feel like people are completely over cleansed.
Yeah.
But also, I just feel like it's basically a marketing trick because how to get people to use 3 times more cleanser.
And there is literally no data on cleansing twice or 3 times. There is for cleansing once. It's only for rosacea patients. But I do think it is there, exactly as you say. It's a nighttime cleanse, get your makeup off, and in the morning a splash of water with your on your face. And then in terms of your ingredients, there is from there no one size fits all. I think if you're really interested in building collagen and that is your biggest concern, then there is no bigger blockbuster than vitamin A. Vitamin A comes in a few forms. The form that you eat is retinol, so that's the form that you absorb into your stomach. In the skin, retinol needs to be converted to retinal, which is also known as retinaldehyde. And then from retinaldehyde, it has to be converted into retinoic acid, which you can get on prescription from your doctor. The problem is that even with young skin, because initially all the trials were done for acne, not for collagen growth, 60% of people have to abandon ship because it's so irritating, because tretinoin can be very, very irritating. And so people are given advice like, oh, just sandwich it between 2 layers of moisturiser. Well, now we've diluted it and I've got no evidence that that's going to work. Or they get told, use it 3 times a week. Well, there have been no studies that have been done of using vitamin A 3 times a week. And if that's all you can tolerate, then I think that's a bit of a waste of time, because I can't tell you that that's actually going to grow collagen for you. Back to the other extreme of retinol. Retinol, it doesn't have any receptors in the skin. There are only retinoic acid receptors in the skin. There's none for retinal and none for retinol. And by the way, one step further away from retinol is retinol palmitate, RETINYL, retinol palmitate. That's even further away from retinol. Retinol, because very little of it is converted to retinal, products need to put a very large amount into a product in the hope that some of it will escape into retinal. And the problem, that's where you run into the retinol burn. And again, if you've got sensitive skin, you're going to have to stop using it. And if you think there's no evidence for retinoic acid at 3 times a week, there's nothing for retinol 3 times a week. And we definitely don't want to be sandwiching it. Plus, the EU is bringing in at the end of 2024, the start of 2025, new regulations around the amount of retinol that's allowed to be in a product, and they're really restricting it to levels where it's basically ineffective. And so what I like is the sweet spot, which is retinol, which is all the rage. Every time I go to a skin conference anywhere in the world, it's all anyone's talking about. And the reason why retinol is so amazing is because in head-to-head trials where you look at one arm has retinol and the other arm has retinoic acid, they are identical in terms of their ability to help with skin cell turnover, renewal of collagen, even acne, things like that. But it's just not irritating. It sits in that sweet spot. So for menopausal women who have that sensitive skin, it is your absolute nirvana. Plus you can stick it in your moisturiser, so it's actually at the right concentrations without having to add a moisturiser on top. So I love retinol. The big drama with retinol is that we are sitting here in Australia, but it's about 30,000 Australian dollars, so probably closer to 20,000 US dollars per kilo, and it needs to be transported from the factory wherever it's made. And you can get some in China, you can also get some made in Europe. We use European retinol, and we need to transport it from the factories in Europe to the factories in Australia where we actually manufacture all of our skincare at minus 20 degrees Celsius. We can't change the cold chain. Like, it has to be maintained at that. So that's why, because it's more expensive than gold, you're often looking at a product that is more expensive. Having said all of which, I certainly for ESK, our products are cheaper than a lot of the rubbish old school retinol products that are out there. So I actually think it's just a matter of being able to live with yourself when you're pricing up your products. But I think some people are nervous about retinol products because of the expense of the raw ingredients.
Yeah, but I have to say the results from them are, people see it.
Yep.
And there's sometimes skincare people they feel like they can't see it, but I do feel like you do see the difference.
Yeah.
Which is great. Okay, so that's vitamin A. Let's talk about vitamin B, niacinamide, B3, maybe B6. What are your thoughts on those?
B3, which is niacinamide, is one of those wonderful ingredients that has evidence. Like that, this is the whole thing with skincare. There are just a few ingredients that have evidence for a lot of different things. So you end up combining a very small number of ingredients, and most of the things that are advertised actually don't have any evidence at all. But when it comes to niacinamide, it has evidence for everything. Well, most importantly, it's a skin barrier builder. So along with panthenol, which is provitamin B5, but also ceramines, which we now know are a big part of that matrix, in that skin barrier, you can actually stick it in skincare and it is absorbed into the skin barrier and actually does repair the skin barrier. With those ingredients, you're going to rebuild your skin barrier. So if you are irritated and itchy, my first step after your sunscreen and only cleansing once a day with a creaming cleanser of a pH of 5.5 maximum, I would be adding in next your skin barrier builders, just because having irritated, dry, itchy skin is a nightmare. So niacinamide, the evidence really sits really between 2 and 5%, and I've seen some 20% niacinamide serums and things like that. Just no evidence for that. They haven't been tried. I'm not saying it doesn't work. We just wouldn't know.
Yes, we don't know.
And some people report that it's a bit strong or a little bit too burny on their face. I also don't think niacinamide is one of those, it's the popular girl at school. She can play with anyone. She'll get in the sandbox and muck in with absolutely anybody. So don't have a separate niacinamide product. It should be in everything. Like niacinamide should be part of your sunscreen. It should be part of your vitamin A cream. It should be part of your depigmentation cream. Like whatever you're going to do, there'll be niacinamide in there. You don't need to have a separate niacinamide serum. In terms of, vitamin B5, so panthenol, best evidence is around wound healing, but also that skin barrier building. Actually, topical vitamin B6 and B12, we don't have a lot of evidence for those. They could be fine. We just haven't done really a lot of the studies yet. But I still think your A's and B's and your C's are really where the action, most of the action is.
Yeah. And what about moisturizers for women of this age? Because dry, everyone's dry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a no-brainer, right? You are losing a lot of moisturizers, and there are different components to a moisturizer. You've got things like humectants that actually draw moisture into the skin, and they'll do that both from drawing moisture from the air into the skin, but also from the deeper layers into the skin. So you just got to be careful with a humectant that you're not actually going to be drying out the lower levels of the skin. So if you're going to just put on a straight hyaluronic acid serum, for example, HA is just a humectant. So it's lovely. It's a plumper temporarily, but it might dry out the skin. So we want to stick a moisturizer on top of it, right? So that's one of the things that we definitely want to be thinking about. But then you've got your emollients, and then you've got your occlusives. So your emollients actually bring moisture into the skin with the ingredients, and then the occlusives sit on top and stop any water escaping. So a lot of people are scared of occlusives because they think that they're going to break out with acne. If you are one of that 25% of women who are having a periacne breakout, or the 14% who are still getting regular breakout in their 50s, like that's a really interesting group of women. I'd be very careful around occlusives. For everyone else, I'm going to be really honest with you. Go to your local supermarket, grab a Vaseline. It's like £2. It's $5 in Australia. If you really want an occlusive, get the actives in your skincare and then chuck a Vaseline over the top if that's what you want to do. I think that's totally fine, and that is going to be one of the cheapest things that you can do for your skin.
Ginny, is there anything that you see repeatedly in your clinic that women are doing that you're like, no?
Oh, lots. Shall we talk about collagen powders?
Okay.
Where are you? I haven't ever asked you. Where are you at with collagen powders?
I just don't know. I feel like what is interesting to me is, one, I think the quality is very divided. I find that some patients think they're amazing and they'll say, my nails are amazing and my hair is stronger. And then other people are like, no, I haven't really seen anything that, tells me that it's going to be helpful. I have to say I don't sort of push it, but I don't say don't do it. I'm kind of very open that if someone finds something helpful, it's unlikely to do them any harm, put it that way.
Most of the studies that have been done on collagen, so there are kind of 3 types roughly. There's collagen that comes out of a cow, bovine collagen. There's marine collagens that comes out of mollusks. And then there's vegan collagen where they actually insert genes from either a mollusk or a beef into a yeast and actually grow it. So I don't know if you really think that that's strictly vegan. If you're really strict vegan, I don't know if it would be. All collagen is a series of 19 amino acids. Whether it comes from a cow, whether you've made it yourself by your fibroblasts, or whether it's from a mollusk or from a yeast, they're all the same, these 19 amino acids, and in a chain. And when you eat food, the first thing that happens is it goes straight to the acid bath to knock off any bugs and stop you from getting food poisoning, we hope. The second thing that happens is you go into the first part of the small intestines where you will meet a plethora, an army of enzymes designed to break down every bit of food into its original components. So if it's a piece of bread, you're going to go into original mini glucose molecules. A big thing of fat, we're going to make it into fatty acids. And if you take a protein, whether it's collagen or a steak or egg or a glass of milk, you're going to break it down into its actual individual component amino acids. And then it'll go into the second half of the small intestines where those nice little small individual molecules will be able to be absorbed through your intestine into the bloodstream and then be a source for your cells to turn them into whatever it needs. If it goes near a muscle, it might be grabbed to be made into a muscle cell. If it's near a vagina, it'll go into a vaginal cell. And if it happens to be in your skin will have the recipe for human collagen. It doesn't have the recipe for bovine collagen or for muscle collagen. And so in the same way that you can't eat an egg and put an egg on your face, you can't eat bovine collagen and put bovine collagen on your face. That's not physically possible. Your genes can't make eggs and your genes can't make bovine collagen. So I've been really wondering about this. So if it's just biologically not plausible, like you could get those essential amino acids by having a steak, a bit of tofu and a glass of milk. Like you really don't need to be having these collagen powders. So what is it that gives the results? And Shauna, I think it's this. I do, as we both do, a lot of diet histories from our patients. And we know that in a premenopausal woman, just to maintain skin, nails, organs, you need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. But the emerging evidence is that women who go through menopause because of some of the changes in our skeletal muscle, we rapidly lose skeletal muscle and bone tissue as we go through the menopause, that we need more protein. And we probably need but in some studies up to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And women are not good at getting protein. And even though they've described this protein leverage effect where apparently we all start craving protein and wanting steaks, haven't really seen that in my patients, definitely not in me. I figure when I go out for dinner with a mixed group, I can watch the men pick the beef out of the stir fry and watch the women all pile up the rice onto their plates. We love our carbs. And we're not good at having our protein. And when I do a diet history, I very rarely get to see a woman who's even having her 0.8 of a grape.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you think an egg has 6 grams of protein, your latte has 6 grams of protein. If you have 2 eggs and a latte, what you would consider a super high protein breakfast, nobody has that. They have a Wheat Bix or
a piece of toast.
Or a piece of toast with no protein at all. But even if you're having that high protein breakfast, that's 18 grams. You're not there. And we also know that, like, for example, vegan proteins are not as well absorbed. We also know that it looks like you need to distribute your protein consumption throughout the day. You can't just have
load it all.
You can't load it all. You can't have 2 steaks at dinner and think that that's enough protein. So I think potentially the people who are putting a protein powder into a smoothie at breakfast or having it as part of a shake, maybe they're just upping their protein intake and maybe that's the contributor. And if that's what it is, all power to them. I'm actually quite happy with that.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it's a little bit like a Snickers bar. Like it's an ultra-processed food and I'd probably prefer you to get your protein from your meals.
So basically it sounds like mostly they're giving you a building block that potentially you're missing out on. And that's what I say to patients. It's not like you're swallowing this collagen and it's going like in a little bus to your face. It just doesn't work.
It's not biologically plausible and and that's good news because nobody wants to eat a tofu and then grow a big, lump of tempeh on their face either. So that's good news.
So one of the things I feel like the current era of women who are becoming perimenopausal, roughly, obviously there's younger and older, but We grew up with cleanse, tone, and moisturize. God, that Clinique toner that
I
would
was
like
a Clinique girl too.
that would like strip paint off your face.
I know. And then we were told that if it burnt, that was a good thing.
Yeah,
It's doing good things for your skin.
So where are we with toner? It's not something that I have to say I use with patients, but people are very attached to toner, and I understand that because they've grown up with it. But what were we ever thinking with toner, and what on earth is it for? And is there anyone who needs a toner?
No. So a toner doesn't even have a definition. I think when you and I grew up with Clinique, because I had that yellow bar of soap followed by the blue alcohol toner,
And then by the
yellow moisturizer.
See, even in Northern Ireland, it was
So with all of that, the toner was just like an extra step, right? I think it was just an extra product. It's sort of come to mean a thin, watery product that you put on your face.
It was a bit burny.
Yes, and some people use it like they see all this brown come off on their cotton bud and they go, you see, the cleansing was not enough. You don't need that. That's going to dry out your face. But even the people who just have a bit of witch hazel or chamomile or I don't know, whatever else is in there, you don't need that. That's just an extra step. And I see a lot of busy women, and my last interest is in making life difficult for them. I just don't think that's necessary. Omit the toner. While we're there, can we omit anything that scrubs the face? That's pro-inflammatory. That is pro-aging. That is pro-pigmentation. Like if you do anything that inflames your face, anything that burns and sizzles, we now know is not doing wonders for your skin. Nothing needs to do that. It's quite the opposite. If it is burning your face, it is causing inflammation. That is actually breaking down collagen. It is adding to your pigmentation. We do not want your face to burn and sizzle. So we definitely don't want scrubs. We don't want you taking your face washer to your face and scrubbing really hard. If your skin looks red after you've applied a skincare, it is not the skincare for you.
I picked your brain a lot, and I promise you I'm nearly finished, but I just want to ask you a little bit about necks.
Yes.
The number of women who come in and they hate their necks. They usually say something like, I've got my dad's neck, or I've got my mum's neck, or I can see it starting. Is there anything that they can do apart from their sunscreen that you believe is helpful with a neck?
So your skin around your body is very similar, although there has been some Chinese work that has actually shown that the pH varies in different parts of your skin and neck. But at the end of the day, all the basic elements of the skin are the same. And in the same way that, the eye area, the only thing that's different about the eyes, it's the thinnest skin in your body. The sole of your foot is the biggest skin, or the thickest skin in your body. There is no evidence for a neck-specific product. That's not really scientifically valid. Some people have spent their life putting sunscreen on their face and ignored their neck, and then it comes to bite you in the bum later. There are some people who wear a little cap that just protects their face but does not protect their neck. So as daggy as they are, we need the great big floppy hat when you're going out for a hike. I know we're just looking like our grandmothers now, but that's just, we do want you to look like a Year 9 geography teacher. Think of that. That's your fashion icon that we want you to go for. There are some people who put some skincare on their face and don't put it on their neck. And some people genetically just have creased a lot more in their necks. So at this point, we don't have really great studies around neck skin. So I ask a lot of my colleagues, because I don't do any injecting, I don't do any needling, or I don't use exosomes. I don't do any of those things. So I ask my colleagues, and some are like, Profilo, it's the best thing for necks. And others are like, no, I use exosomes. Exosomes are the best for necks. And some people are saying, polynucleotides, you got to inject those. They're absolutely fantastic. I'm one of your patients who hates their neck, but like I kind of wearing it like a badge of honor now. Like I kind of figure I've got to an age where I'm allowed to have a few wrinkles on my neck. I don't really care, but I want to support whoever wants to do whatever for her neck, and you might need to kiss a few frogs to find your handsome prince. Just put your sunscreen on, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish, I always ask every guest the same question, which is, Ginny, if you could talk to your 20-something self, what would you tell her?
Don't marry that guy. No. I think that there are things that make you excessively anxious and worried at 20 that honestly by the time you get to your mid-50s, you just don't give a rat's anymore. And you'd say, don't worry. But I don't know that any 20-year-old would listen to anybody else telling them not to worry, because things just consume you. So probably nothing. I just Yeah, I think just move on with each next stage, embrace every failure. So all the failures I had at 20 are probably made me who I am today. So that's probably a good thing.
And if anyone's listening and they're in that postmenopausal age group and they think they've left it too late to get themselves a good skincare regime, what do you think?
Look, that we know from studies that it's never too late, that you can actually make really meaningful changes. So the idea that all you need is a bit of soap and a bit of the cheapest moisturizer from the supermarket, that was the advice I got when I was at medical school in the 1980s. Yeah, that's old school. Don't worry about that anymore. We now have really good evidence. And I think, Shauna, this is something that you and I again both see, is that women don't want to spend the money on themselves because they feel so guilty and so ashamed and not worthy. And they want to, if they've got a bit of spare time, they go and visit their mum, or they go and to the sports carnival. And if they've got a spare money, they spend it on the kids. You are a ringmaster of a really big circus. How you are about yourself, how you feel really, really matters a lot. So please just believe that you're worth it, and it's okay. It's okay to spend a bit of money on skincare if that makes you feel better, because that will help everyone else as well.
I think the reality is that if you do feel more confident in your appearance, whatever that might mean for different people, then you do have a little bit of a more spring in your step. And if you feel not so confident in your appearance, you're much more likely to play it small.
So true. And women who feel better in their appearance bring that energy to relationships. They bring that energy to work that can allow them to get a bigger bonus or to progress up through their career. So you feeling good about yourself is not just a vanity project. No one's expecting you to get on the Victoria's Secret's catwalk tomorrow, but this is just about bringing your best self to every situation in life. And similarly, if you don't care, if you're like, I love these wrinkles, I'm really happy with them, I don't want to do anything, again, you do you. I don't think there's any right or wrong, but let's not gaslight women who actually go, no, I want to actually look better. That's good. I love that for you.
I agree. Thank you so much. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
When I started this podcast back in December 23, I knew that I was lucky enough to have amazing conversations with various health professionals across all facets of medicine and allied health. And I knew that you would probably really enjoy being a fly on the wall to hear what we talked about. And that's how the podcast was born. And what you probably don't know is that this is a bit of a passion project. We don't have any sponsors or funding. And without your help, we won't be able to continue bringing you these great guests. So if you can please spread the word about the podcast, share it with someone who you think might benefit from the conversation that you've just listened to, or if you can leave us a review or a comment, it would mean the absolute world, because that actually helps the podcast spread further and get more people to hear our message and hopefully allow us to invite bigger and bigger guests onto the show. And I would so appreciate you helping me back. Thank you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.